Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the April 21st edition of Get Secure. My name's Mike Blangiforti, and I'm your host. I'm pleased today to be joined by a very special guest. Scotty hails from the NYPD, as I do, and he's also an expert in school safety and homeland security. So I'm happy to have Mr. Scott Downs today. Welcome to Get Secure.
Thank you, Mike.
Scott. Good to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's a very interesting topic that really needs to be addressed in the appropriate manner, and it really has not.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to speak, obviously, to your area of expertise. And what I'd like to start with is your take on what happened with the school stabbing, west of Pittsburgh. 21 children stabbed before the assistant principal and a school athlete got on top of this kid and stopped the threat.
That's one thing that is kind of amazing, that the acts of bravery and heroism that really triumph during these things are not really the story that's usually told. It's always of, unfortunately, either the victims, the poor victim side, or always involved with the subject that actually committed these heinous crimes. In Murraysville, PA, the Franklin Regional High School shooting, was a 16-year-old sophomore. And it seems to be an ongoing trend with youth today that every time that something in the media is centralized, they seem to want to somewhat outdo or... It's just a theory, but there's really no rhyme or reason behind it. But in this stabbing, it was, he stabbed it has conflicting accounts. It's either 19 or 21. He supposedly stabbed a security guard or a school resource officer. So a lot of the logistics of it.
We keep seeing a theme with, not just this school stabbing, but, school safety in general with active shooters. And the theme that we keep seeing is consistent. And even if you go all the way back to Columbine with Klebold and Harris, the psychological markers are there.
Well, see, and it's funny, statistically, school violence is actually on the decline. Active shooter situations in the public are actually on the rise. And I know that you're very aware of this because we have discussed this previously. We have to take into account that since the 1999 shooting of Columbine, the media seems to have really focused on school violence. And school violence now being more of a public outcry and concern seems to be more of a media frenzy among really reporting what's going on. Going back to these violence, the last school stabbings were not prevalent in the last year. There was only one in 2013 in the Texas Community College, where a student went around the campus and he stabbed 14 different students. There was another one that same, a couple months later, was a high school student actually murdered one student and hurt 3 other in the same kind of stabbing. So it really wasn't a big issue, the stabbings. And then, ironically, since the Murraysville thing, there was 2 really heinous crimes that just was committed within the last week. Last Tuesday, Chief Rick Henderson of the Calgary Police Department, University of Calgary, reported that 5 murders on campus. That same day, another high school student in the same area stabbed another 16-year-old sophomore again. So we see a trend now of knives. School violence is something that needs to be addressed. How do we go about addressing it?
Do you think there's a nexus between the stabbing that happened in, like a copycat?
That seems to be the trend. I mean, because again, if you see prevalently, what happens is you see one thing hyping on the media, and then for some reason it's like a domino effect, and it seems to happen frequently or more often in a quick period of time. And then it'll lull, and then something else will happen. I don't know if it's something that we need to look into, or something that needs to be addressed from a psychological or a social point of view. On, the experts would have to look into that aspect of it.
And speaking of some of the expert stuff, I did want Scott to explain just a little bit about himself. I said at the top of the show that he hails from the NYPD, but boy, has Scott done some things post-NYPD, so I'm hoping you can tell the folks about that.
Yes, I am a former New York City police officer. I worked in East New York, Brooklyn. I'm very proud of working in one of the most deadliest precincts in the city of New York. I have gone on to educate myself. I have a BA in education, which I graduated summa cum laude. I have an advanced certificate in emergency management. I have an advanced certificate. I have an advanced certificate in Homeland Security, and I actually have my master's in science in Homeland Security Management.
Right.
I am a DCJS instructor for general topics. I am also a New York State Department of State bounty enforcement instructor. I am a New York State certified education teacher in both social studies and public and private security operations. I'm a New York State notary. I'm a certified paralegal. So my background
just a few things. Yes. Just a few things.
I am well versed in a lot of the law and education when it comes to this. So speaking of this topic of school violence, it's not that it hasn't been addressed, and it has, and I give the professionals the utmost credit in addressing this. Just maybe we need to reevaluate how we do kind of maybe the threat assessment and the risk assessment. I know at Dowling that you said that you implemented something like this.
Yeah, well, we combined the, it was an idea that I had because I thought it made sense. And, Dowling College relied on my expertise from the NYPD and what I did know about campus safety. And what we did do was combine the threat assessment team with the behavioral intervention team.
Very good.
And I was surprised that nobody had thought of that previously, because you and I both know that the behavioral intervention or the psychological element and assessing threats kind of go hand in hand. So when you bring in that team, right, and there's a social worker who's an expert in identifying psychological issues, and then you bring in folks like us that know a little bit about school safety and assessing threats, combining the two made sense. So I called it the Campus Safety and Intervention Team, and it worked exactly how it was designed to work. So, I mean, what's your thoughts on assessing these threats? And
well, it's kind of funny going back to a little bit of my background. I'm also a fourth-generation police officer, and I always hear my father's voice in my head when he says that, unfortunately, when nothing ever happens, you're doing a great job. And again, when you're a cop on a foot post and nothing ever happens, you did a great job. It's the first time that we start Monday morning quarterbacking, and we start doing this when something does happen. So going back to your threat assessment, I think you hit the nail right on the head. We need to properly identify what a threat is. There is a direct threat. Everyone knows what a direct threat is. I actually placed a bomb in the gymnasium. That's actually a direct threat. How about an indirect threat? If I wanted to, I can kill you. Well, those are two serious ones that stand right out.
These are the things that we really need to identify is the indirect threats. A direct threat, obviously you're going to take action on, but it's the indirect threats, which is these, some people might express suicidal ideology. Say, I really want to kill myself, but seem to be on the we need to talk about that. We need to address that. Somebody might make a veiled threat, like, I could blow up this whole place. I wish I had a gun so I could do that. And we really need to identify what is somebody saying. But as I was speaking about in previous shows, and I'll get your opinion on this, people have a reluctance to report somebody who expresses these type of indirect threats. And it could be family saying, oh, it's just, that's nothing. Could be friends that might have concern, but might just say, well, no, I don't want to say anything about that. And we have to kind of change that mindset.
And you've hit two great points on the head, and the other one that we don't really address, and I know the Secret Service usually does, it's called a veiled threat. I call it an implied threat, okay? Because what happens is we would be better off without you here. It is still a threat, but a lot of people, like you said, they ignore it. He's just kidding, or it's a joke. Unfortunately, today's day and age, we can't take a joke. Where you hit the nail on the head where, unfortunately, threats in school or threats about a school are not just the school's problem. They are everybody's problem.
Right.
Like you said, we need to build a climate of trust. And there has to be a bridge, like you said, parents that can have outlet. You should have local law enforcement involved. You should have your local clergy, your house of worships, community leaders, politicians. An outlet where these people can build a trust and feel safe that they're not going to be stigmatized.
So expand it beyond the school.
Absolutely, because again, it needs to be an outlet of building trust. Even students. Who is the first person that knows anything that goes on out there? Kids. Where did the kids go to? Did they go to you? Did they go to the big bad principal?
No.
Oh no, he's a rat. You know, again, there is things that go along with that thing, and I think you
that
hit it right on the head.
The reluctancy, and that's why I really and what a great idea you had about involving the whole community at large to educate the folks out there, because the importance of this, and I don't think that the media does enough with the education. I think it's up to the experts in the field, people like us, to I volunteer my time at my daughter's school. They do have a team where they rely on former cops to say, how can we make our school a safer environment? And it makes sense. But there's also, in addition to the volunteering our time, people say all the time, the NIMBY philosophy,
Yes.
which is, for the folks out there, it's not in my backyard. Meaning that people have this attitude that, it can't happen here. But these school shootings, the active shooters, the workplace violence, the school stabbings, they're not happening in the major cities. They're happening in these remote areas. So that NIMBY philosophy is really the wrong one.
Well, we could use even the Kitty Genovese fun thing where, don't worry, someone else called or someone else did it. So, the poor woman, but I agree. And the problem with that is going back to that building the trust among each other, and that it's not a big sting. It needs to be prompt, discreet, and responsible. And again, if school officials can implement it somewhere where, I know we've adopted this thing in school where, notify somebody, see something, say something, and that's from the Department of Homeland Security, and it is a great philosophy. But if again, is someone going to come forward and say something if there's going to be repercussions after the fact?
Well, we had an anonymous reporting line at Dowling College, so people could either go online to contact the Campus Safety and Intervention team, or they could call anonymously to the 24-hour command center that we had, because even though we'd love to interview the person,
right.
that we don't like anonymous reports, because we might have something that we want to talk to the person about. However, what it does do is it provides that forum to somebody to be able to still report something, and I think that's important.
And I think that's great too, because even if the person was thinking about an act of violence, and it was funny, is going back to a lot of these, the psychological profiling and the traits of that, there's still a lot of contradicting statements that, he's a loner, he's not a loner. Again, we have to look at it from a proper threat assessment, and what happens is if you have professionals involved, you need risk assessment or risk analysis, you need the threat assessment, you need a behavioral analysis or a personality trait assessment, where that you can, once this objective comes into play, that people that are in the right position to address it are there immediately and not wait.
Right.
Okay, instead of being reactive, we need to start being proactive.
Right. And there's not enough of that.
No, and it's not. And again, we can go back to the mental health issue. We're afraid of violating laws. Yeah.
But we looked at what happened in Fort Hood,
yes.
Military institution.
And
and the second time, inexplicable.
Yeah, that's another thing that if we want to use, we'll go into threat assessment of our soldiers coming home. We really do not do enough for them returning home from a war. This has been going on since the Korean and Vietnam War. This is not a new.
Yeah, sometimes we forget history.
Yes, we really do. If you look at the World War II veterans, they're a generation of heroes, and everyone loved them when they came home. It was a big deal. These other soldiers come back, and they're not really. They have a hard time segueing back into society. And again, these are things that need to be addressed. Yes, and it always is a money issue, and this is the unfortunate part.
We have to be more proactive. I agree with you 100%. But now, if you're talking to these school administrators out there, give them some advice.
Well, this is the problem. What they do is I always say the reactive approach is approach that we all take. A lot of people have emergency operation plans in place at schools. But what you don't have in place is the proper enhanced emergency operations plan where I have the best applied science, best practice methods to circumvent, God forbid there is a tragedy, okay? We're all good when nothing happens, but when something happens, we need to be professionals and say, okay, I'm going to teach I call it the boots on the ground. To me, a teacher or a professor inside a school is the person that needs to know the most. And it's funny because we'll go back to the stabbing. Principal, Mr. Sam King, tackled a shooter and another student. God bless him for his heroic actions. But it took 5 minutes before he did that.
And that's an eternity in our world.
And what happens is if you go back to national response time on law enforcement, the average response time is about 29% in the first 5 minutes. So unfortunately, a lot of these incidents are over before law enforcement even arrives. So you, as the boots on the ground, need to be the most educated, the most trained, and the best trained to implement these things. And again, it doesn't always have to be about money. Find the right person, find the right avenue to. Like I said, a lot of these enhanced lockdown operations plan that we use during the school. I told you I'm doing a huge paper on active shooter and education facilities.
Yeah, no, and I want you to talk about that thesis. Could
yes,
I call
I'm doing,
it a
yes,
thesis?
it's a thesis. Yes, it's a huge thesis. But what I did is I used a comparative analysis with a quantitative analysis. I actually went to the boots on the ground. I interviewed teachers, professors, gym teachers, sports officials, anyone that's involved with a school function to find out. And you know what? The unfortunate part is we really don't know what we're doing.
And in today's day and age, you just interviewed a handful of people, and they didn't have the knowledge.
And that's again, if we always, I can use the cigarette smoking thing. People smoked in the 70s. We educated people, and people don't smoke anymore. I think it's a great thing. Education is a way to change and make alternatives to a really horrific thing.
Right. It's funny that you mentioned. I was actually watching an episode of The Twilight Zone, believe it or not, last week, and you know what they had on? And this was filmed in the 60s, Scott, right? And they had a plane full of people smoking cigarettes. And you know, basically it's a flying tube. And even though they would, and they didn't always put the people in the back.
Right.
In the 60s, everybody smoked everywhere. And, you know, but it just, you know, speaks to the example that you were saying about smoking.
Well, and like I said, in retrospect, what I said is, and again, the reason why I say always the boots on the ground are the people that are in, and again, my thesis doesn't just apply to schools. It applies to a big corporate and building. Because my study just found the best evidence that will protect your life and your safety. So again, it's not about what the policy that's in place because the district says. And again, by law, most schools are in compliance with the law, but it's not really an effective plan.
Yeah, in compliance and knowing everything that you want to teach.
Right.
I mean, I guess, isn't the goal with this, Scott, to take like your thesis and bring it to the folks, to the boots on the ground?
Yes, and that's basically what the crux of what my recommendations were and my findings were, that I have come up with a training program and an acronym for teachers only, that because again, there is one part at the end that is adult content, because again, during an active shooter situation, you have to use something as a last resort.
Right.
And I would never want to have anybody want to implement that part of it if they don't feel safe with what they're doing. So I would teach it or I don't. But there is part that the students need to know.
Right.
And the part of the students need to know, it's part for their safety too. And again, parents should be on board with this. Yeah. Because again, God forbid it does happen. And we don't want it to happen.
Right.
But if it does, at least that you know now that you have someone that actually spent the time and the effort to put back the best practices that we know have worked.
Yeah. And to lose the not in my backyard policy, because it can happen in your backyard. We've seen it time and time again. So it's, and you know, I'd like to talk to you about this a little bit more on future episodes.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's such an important topic, and maybe, you know, we could take, you know, this show and like, you know, maybe blast out the video to different schools and stuff.
I would love to. Like I said, I've contacted a couple of Board of Ed people about even presenting it to them for free, just to show them that this is what, scratch your head and go, wow, you know what, I really wasn't taught something the proper way.
Yeah.
My goal was to educate, but to educate with the best practices that are out there that have worked. These are known methods that I have done the research and actually found that these actually worked and prevented any more carnage or death to people that didn't need to be. Yeah. going back to your threat assessment, that is the key, one of the bigger keys that I don't even address. My paper addresses the actual what to do if there is one. The threat assessment, which I agree with you, is one of the things that is the biggest overlooked issue.
So maybe I'll write the paper on the proactive
That would be great.
part.
Well, the thesis, the threat assessment, the risk assessment, the personality assessment, those are all, we all know being in law enforcement, when you look at someone and like, well, they look a little off. I think teachers have that same intuition.
Yeah.
You know,
and sometimes people write papers. You know, I had a situation at the college where a student wrote a paper that had all the earmarks of something being wrong. You know, he wanted to kill animals, and you know, we know about the cult to cult thing and how that works with, it starts with, you know, animal sacrifice. Anyway, the paper made it to my attention, and I read it, and I was like, oh, no. This is something we need to address directly, but it's that education.
Right. I don't mean to laugh that it was being funny. What I'm saying I'm laughing is, you're right. We all see it. And again, what you said is, what is the avenue?
But that professor did identify it, saying, oh, no, this isn't normal. I need to get this into the hands of an expert.
Oh, perfect. But that's we need more. But even, how about, you know, people that can go into youth community centers and do the same thing. This doesn't have to be something done just on a school level. And again, we keep kind of trying to make it the school's responsibility. And the unfortunate part to me is schools and educators are in the business of educating, not protecting.
Well, and we have to change that mindset.
Yes, we really do. Again, I know we have a duty of care as teachers and professors to protect the children. But again, protection starts at home with the family. Yeah. If you know your son is having some kind of weird thoughts, or he's, you know, socially awkward, and those are things that, you know, you as a parent, or, you know,
an obligation.
Yeah, I think you really do, especially today's day and age, because school violence now is becoming such a heightened sense of public awareness that to do nothing.
Yeah. So, we're going to talk about this more, you know, because I want to talk about it on future episodes a little bit more in depth, and what your thesis. But we're going to switch gears for a second and speak to your other area of expertise, which is Homeland Security. So today, Boston Marathon.
Well, I just saw the interview with Peter King. He's the Home of Homeland Security for Congress. And I know he was up there, and they're doing an unbelievable job this year. I mean, I know they've implemented protocol where no runners can't have any more backpacks or duffel bags brought to the arena. They have installed, I think they said 1,200 surveillance cameras around the area. I know they've immobilized law enforcement from all over the country. I know ESU, our emergency service response teams up there. So again, I think now they've gone above and beyond what they need to do to make that city safe. Unfortunately, the only thing that I would worry about is some kind of silly copycat guy. You know, that's the only unfortunate part, that if someone wants to... But
certainly Boston has certainly done enough insofar as, you know, keeping those folks safe along the route that the marathon is. And I don't think you could do enough, but certainly they have gone above and beyond, which is great to see.
See, the funny part about it is, as much as we do on the proactive side of trying to prevent it, you got to remember, these guys are out there doing the same thing to try to infiltrate on how to demoralize your thing. Because again, the biggest thing in their ideology is that fear. That fear factor is what makes you, oh my God, should I even go to the Boston Marathon? Or should I go to a Yankee Stadium game? Or should I go to the Super Bowl? That fear is what really is their motivation, is for you to be afraid of doing what you normally do every day. So again, I think the best advice is to go about your everyday life and do it, but just be aware. Be conscious of the person to your left. Be conscious to the person of your right. If you see something that does not fit well in the pit of your stomach, as we used to do as a cop.
Gut feeling.
Gut feeling. If something's not right, react. Pick up the phone, dial 911. Hey, you know what? This guy in the hat's a little shady. I don't know what he's doing. Let the professionals do their job.
Absolutely.
And again, I always say I call the people on the ground my first responders. My first reporters. You're not a first responder, you're my first reporter. You know more information than we will ever know as law enforcement or security.
And we talk about education, and you know, wouldn't you say that most folks out there that are lining the marathon route or parade or whatever it is, whatever type of public event it is, same as I was talking about a reluctance to report on the part of family, friends, when somebody's exhibiting behavior, don't you agree there's also a reluctance to, oh, well, maybe I'm just bothering the police officer, maybe I'm just bothering that person in uniform. But as a former cop, you as a former cop, I'm happy to receive that type of concern.
And it's kind of funny when you say that. People used to laugh at me and say all the time is, your best information is from the people out there. You become a better cop when you interact more with the community. Again, yes, people have to get that mindset out of their head that you're not bothering the cop. The cop wants to be told on the street that, hey, you know what? That guy over there looks shady. Or, you know what? That guy doesn't sit right to me.
Because one of the things that we're always concerned about is what they call these lone wolf terrorists, which are domestic terrorists that you have no idea, maybe they're not exhibiting behavior. So that see something, say something on the part of a civilian, it just heightens that importance. And Scott, I'm telling you, we have to, not just us, but as a global law enforcement community, expert community on things that have to do with Homeland Security, we need to get boots on the ground, people like us, to educate the folks. I don't think we're doing enough.
Well, you hit it on the head. We have to think locally, but we have to act globally. Again, we have to look at what's going on in the world. I said, and I hate to compare our Homeland Security because I think we are one of the best in the nation at securing ourselves. Mm-hmm. If you look at Israel's model, they use a lot of behavioral assessments on people. But if you leave a package unattended in an airport for seconds, everybody in the airport's screaming, unattended package, unattended package, unattended. They're trained to do that for their safety. Maybe we can somehow transport that mindset into people here saying, hey, you know what, officer, that guy on the corner, you know what?
Yeah.
Got a hat on. If going back to a good story with the Boston Marathon last year, the guy that lost his legs, and the person that saved his life was pinching the artery. When he first woke up, do you know what he said? He goes, look for a guy in a baseball hat. That was their first lead. That was a big lead to find. That's what they, again, so anything that you think you see.
Certainly narrows the crowd.
By far. And again, he saw something. Didn't sit well with him.
Right.
He said something after the fact, but again, we look back in hindsight, and yes, we can Monday morning plug. I'm not trying to do that.
And that's domestic, and you know what's going on in the Ukraine right now. And you were just mentioning about global.
Yes.
Is what's going on in the Ukraine, is it going to affect our home front?
Only time will tell, unfortunately, with that. Should we prepare? Yes, by far. Again, thinking locally, acting globally, we have to, because what happens is we're going to look globally and see what's going on. Will it affect our home front as a nation? And I think we do. Going back to the school violence, I think we need to take a deeper look at this. Again, going back to my enhanced lockdown procedures with schools. We can go back to a very similar story back in Russia in 2004 when terrorists took over a school and over 300 people were killed and 700... Again,
when these political global events happen, my concern is always like copycat type of stuff here at the home front.
And you're right. And again, sometimes the idea simulates in someone else's head. And
we have the biggest melting pot here in New York City. So, of course we have Ukrainian Americans, we have Russian Americans. And, my concern is always, will they interact here in some way? And last question I have for you today, because, it's a great conversation.
Yes. I mean, we could be here all day, thank you.
But and certainly Mike and Desiree don't want us to talk all day long. Last question. Where's Malaysian Flight 370? I know that's
speculation.
It's a loaded question.
What is amazing today with technology has advanced so much that we can't find anything from the plane, whether a black box or the flight recorder or a seat cushion,
and anything.
A driver's license.
Oh boy, it concerns me that with today's technology that we can't find a Boeing 777.
Yeah.
No matter where, satellite radar, the whole 9 yards.
Right. I don't know if maybe the Malaysian government really should actually reach out to the United States and ask for more help in a sense where we are a little bit better advanced at kind of these things. I don't know what the correlation between the two are, but maybe it would be a great first step.
Well, Listen, definitely something we could talk
Yes,
about in
absolutely.
the future. But I'm definitely having you on again because
I would love to.
I think we just touched the tip of the iceberg. So thanks, Scott, for coming on. Really
you very much.
appreciate it.
Yes,
so,
thank you very much.
so that's it for today's episode of Get Secure. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. And remember to get Arrow, get secure. I'm your host, Mike Blangiforti. Have a great week, everybody.